Alexander Sterling had everything money could buy, except the one thing that mattered most, until he saw Elena Vasquez teaching at the inner city school his foundation was considering for funding, and realized that the woman who had walked away from him 12 years ago was the same person who could teach him that love was the only currency that truly counted, if he was brave enough to risk his guarded heart one more time. Before we explore Alexander's journey from ruthless billionaire to a man rediscovering what really matters, and the lost love that changes everything he thought he knew about success and happiness, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Your support helps us bring you more captivating romantic stories every week. Now let's step into Alexander's world, where fortune and fame can't buy the one thing his heart truly needs. Alexander Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office overlooking downtown Seattle, watching the evening traffic stream through the city like rivers of light 40 stories below. At 36, he was the CEO and founder of Sterling Technologies, a software empire worth $8 billion that he had built from a college dorm room startup into one of the most influential tech companies in the world. The office itself was a testament to Alexander's success, with sleek modern furniture, original artwork worth millions, and technology that rivaled NASA's mission control. Yet, despite all the material evidence of his achievements, Alexander felt an emptiness that had been growing for years, a sense that something essential was missing from his carefully orchestrated life of power, wealth, and public recognition. Alexander's journey to billionaire status had required sacrifices that seemed reasonable at the time, but had left him isolated and emotionally disconnected from everything except his work and financial success. He had no close personal relationships, no family of his own, and no interests beyond the next merger, acquisition, or product launch that would expand his empire and increase his net worth. The latest addition to Alexander's business portfolio was the Sterling Foundation, a charitable organization that his publicist had recommended to improve his public image and provide tax benefits while addressing social causes that aligned with his company's values. Alexander had approached philanthropy with the same ruthless efficiency he brought to business, focusing on education technology initiatives that could demonstrate measurable outcomes and positive return on investment. The Sterling Foundation's newest project was a comprehensive review of urban education programs that could benefit from technology integration and educational reform initiatives. Alexander had tasked his foundation director with identifying schools that showed promise but lacked resources, with the goal of implementing pilot programs that could be scaled nationally if they proved successful. Lincoln High School in South Seattle had been selected as a potential pilot site based on its demographics, academic challenges, and the innovative programs that several teachers had developed despite limited funding and administrative support. Alexander had decided to conduct the site visit personally, partly because education technology was his area of expertise, and partly because he wanted to ensure that foundation resources were being allocated effectively. Alexander arrived at Lincoln High School on a Tuesday morning in October, accompanied by his foundation director and a small team of education consultants who would assess the school's needs and capabilities. The building itself was clearly underfunded, with aging infrastructure and overcrowded classrooms, but Alexander was impressed by the energy and dedication evident among both students and staff despite the challenging conditions. The tour included visits to multiple classrooms, meetings with administrators, and presentations from teachers who had developed creative approaches to engaging students and improving academic outcomes within the constraints of limited resources. Alexander was struck by the passion and competence of the educational professionals who were clearly making a significant difference in their students' lives despite systemic challenges. It was in the third-floor English classroom that Alexander saw her, and the recognition hit him like a physical blow that left him momentarily unable to breathe or speak. Elena Vasquez stood at the front of her classroom, leading a discussion about literature and social justice with a group of juniors who were clearly engaged and inspired by her teaching. She was exactly as beautiful as she had been 12 years ago, but with a confidence and grace that came from years of meaningful work and personal growth. Elena was explaining how authors used narrative techniques to explore themes of inequality and social change, and her students were responding with insights and questions that demonstrated both intellectual curiosity and personal investment in the material. Alexander found himself captivated by not only Elena's presence, but by her obvious skill as an educator and her ability to inspire critical thinking in students who might otherwise have been written off by the education system. Elena had not yet noticed Alexander among the visitors at the back of her classroom, and he was able to observe her teaching for several minutes while trying to process the shock of seeing the woman he had never been able to forget, despite 12 years of trying to move on from their relationship. Elena was wearing a simple dress and cardigan that emphasized her natural beauty while remaining appropriate for her professional environment, and she moved through her classroom with the ease of confidence of someone who had found her calling. Alexander's memories of Elena were complicated by the guilt and regret he carried about the way their relationship had ended during their senior year of college. They had been deeply in love and had planned a future together, but Alexander's obsession with building his startup company had gradually consumed all his time and attention, leaving no room for the relationship that had once been the most important thing in his life. Elena had tried to be understanding about Alexander's business ambitions, but she had also been clear about her need for a partner who could balance professional success with personal relationships and shared values about what made life meaningful. When Alexander had been offered a major investment opportunity that would require him to move to Silicon Valley and work 16-hour days for the foreseeable future, Elena had asked him to choose between his company and their relationship. Alexander had chosen his company, believing that financial success would eventually create opportunities for everything else he wanted, including the ability to build a life with Elena once his business was established. Elena had walked away from their relationship with dignity and sadness, wishing him success while making it clear that she could not wait indefinitely for him to decide that their love was worth prioritizing over his professional ambitions. The 12 years since their breakup had proven Elena right about Alexander's priorities and lifestyle choices. His company had indeed become extraordinarily successful, but his single-minded focus on business had left him without meaningful personal relationships or the emotional connections that made success satisfying. He had dated occasionally, but had never been able to commit to anyone else, partly because every relationship was unconsciously measured against what he had shared with Elena. Elena's presence at Lincoln High School forced Alexander to confront the reality that she had built a meaningful, purposeful life without him, choosing a career that served others rather than accumulating wealth and prestige. Her obvious fulfillment and professional competence made Alexander question whether his definition of success had been too narrow and whether the choices that had made him rich had also made him poor in ways that mattered more than money. When the classroom visit concluded and Elena finally noticed Alexander among the foundation visitors, her reaction was composed but clearly shocked. She maintained her professional demeanor while greeting the visiting group, but Alexander could see the surprise and complex emotions in her eyes as she realized that the billionaire philanthropist touring her school was the same person who had broken her heart more than a decade ago. Alexander managed to maintain his own professional composure during the introduction, though he felt as though everyone in the room must be able to see his emotional turmoil. Elena's handshake was brief and polite, and she answered questions about her teaching methods and student outcomes with the same professionalism she had shown throughout the classroom observation. But there was an unmistakable tension between them that made the interaction feel both significant and awkward. The remainder of Alexander's school visit was a blur of meetings and presentations that he struggled to focus on, his attention divided between his foundation responsibilities and his awareness of Elena's presence in the building. He found himself making mental notes about her teaching style, her interaction with students, and the obvious respect she commanded from both colleagues and young people, who clearly saw her as more than just another teacher. When the official tour concluded, Alexander made an excuse to return to Elena's classroom, claiming that he had additional questions about her innovative teaching methods that might inform the Foundation's education technology initiatives. Elena agreed to speak with him privately, though her manner remained politely professional rather than personally engaging. Their first private conversation in 12 years was stilted and careful, with both of them maintaining professional distance while being acutely aware of their shared history and the emotional undercurrents that made every word seem loaded with additional meaning. Alexander asked thoughtful questions about Elena's work, and she provided detailed answers that demonstrated her expertise and passion for education, but neither of them acknowledged their personal connection directly. Elena's dedication to her students and her innovative approaches to teaching literature and writing impressed Alexander, both professionally and personally. She had clearly found work that aligned with her values about making a positive difference in the world, and her success as an educator reflected the same intelligence and compassion that had made Alexander fall in love with her during college. Alexander left Lincoln High School that day with his foundation mission accomplished, but his personal life in turmoil. Seeing Elena again had reminded him of everything he had given up in pursuit of financial success, and her obvious fulfillment in work that served others rather than accumulating wealth and prestige made him question whether his definition of achievement had been fundamentally flawed. Over the following days, Alexander found himself unable to concentrate on his business responsibilities, distracted by memories of his relationship with Elena and questions about whether it might be possible to reconnect with her after 12 years of separation. He realized that he knew virtually nothing about her current life beyond her teaching career, including whether she was married, had children, or was involved with someone else. Alexander's obsession with Elena's current situation led him to conduct the kind of research that his wealth and resources made possible, though he was careful to respect her privacy and avoid anything that might be considered intrusive or inappropriate. He learned that Elena lived in a modest apartment near the school, was not married, and devoted most of her free time to volunteer work with literacy programs and community organizations. The information about Elena's single status gave Alexander hope that there might be an opportunity to reconnect with her, but he was also aware that his wealth and lifestyle might be more of a barrier than an advantage in any attempt to rebuild their relationship. Elena had chosen a life of service and simplicity that stood in stark contrast to his world of luxury and conspicuous consumption. Alexander's decision to approach Elena personally rather than professionally was complicated by his awareness that their different circumstances might make any romantic overture seem inappropriate or even manipulative. He was a billionaire with unlimited resources, while she was a public school teacher living modestly on her salary and dedicating her life to serving others rather than accumulating wealth and status. The solution to Alexander's dilemma came when he realized that the Sterling Foundation's work with Lincoln High School provided a legitimate reason for ongoing contact with Elena that could potentially develop into something more personal if she was interested and willing. Alexander decided to personally oversee the Foundation's pilot program at the school, giving him regular opportunities to work with Elena while respecting her professional environment and personal boundaries. Alexander's involvement in the Lincoln High School project was more hands-on than his usual foundation work, but his genuine interest in education reform and his desire to spend time near Elena made the increased time commitment feel worthwhile rather than burdensome. He found himself looking forward to school visits and meetings with teachers in ways that reminded him of how much he had once enjoyed learning and intellectual challenges beyond business strategy. Elena's initial wariness about Alexander's presence at her school gradually gave way to professional respect as she observed his genuine commitment to the foundation's educational mission and his willingness to listen to teachers' perspectives on what students actually needed to succeed. His questions were thoughtful and informed, and his suggestions for technology integration were practical, rather than flashy or expensive for the sake of impressive appearances. As they worked together on curriculum development and program implementation, Elena began to see glimpses of the person Alexander had been during college before his single-minded pursuit of wealth had consumed his personality and priorities. The foundation work revealed Alexander's intelligence, creativity, and genuine desire to make a positive difference in the world, though Elena remained cautious about interpreting his personal interest in the project. Alexander's transformation during his time at Lincoln High School was gradual, but profound, as he rediscovered the intellectual curiosity and social awareness that had been dormant during his years of focusing exclusively on business success. Working with Elena and her colleagues reminded him that meaningful achievement could be measured in lives changed rather than dollars accumulated, and that the most satisfying work was often that which served others rather than advancing personal wealth or status. The breakthrough in Alexander and Elena's personal relationship came during a school crisis, when several students were facing academic probation due to family circumstances that affected their ability to complete assignments and attend classes regularly. Elena advocated passionately for additional support services rather than punitive measures, and Alexander found himself moved by her fierce dedication to protecting and nurturing students who were struggling with challenges beyond their control. Alexander's response to the crisis was to quietly fund comprehensive support services for the affected students, including tutoring, counseling, and family assistance programs that addressed the root causes of their academic difficulties rather than simply punishing the symptoms. Elena's gratitude for Alexander's intervention was genuine and personal, marking the first time since their reunion that she had responded to him as Alexander rather than as the Sterling Foundation's representative. Their conversation about the student crisis and Alexander's response revealed the values and priorities that had once drawn them together, and Elena began to see that Alexander's success had not entirely eliminated the person she had loved during college. His willingness to use his wealth and influence to help struggling students demonstrated the compassion and social awareness that Elena valued, even if those qualities had been buried under years of business-focused lifestyle choices. Alexander's growing involvement in Elena's work and his obvious personal interest in reconnecting with her created a complex situation that both of them approached carefully, aware of the potential complications that could arise from mixing their professional collaboration with their unresolved personal history. Elena was attracted to the person Alexander was becoming through his foundation work, but she was also wary of repeating the pattern that had ended their college relationship. The conversation that changed everything between Alexander and Elena took place after a successful school assembly where students presented projects that had been enhanced by the Sterling Foundation's technology and resources. Alexander had stayed after the event to help Elena clean up, and their casual interaction had evolved into the kind of extended, personal conversation they had not shared since college. Elena asked Alexander directly about his life outside of business and whether he had found happiness and fulfillment in the success he had chosen over their relationship 12 years earlier. Alexander's answer was honest and vulnerable, acknowledging that his professional achievements had come at the cost of personal connections and emotional satisfaction that money could not replace. Alexander admitted that he had never stopped thinking about Alina and wondering what their life together might have been like if he had made different choices during college. He expressed regret about prioritizing his business ambitions over their relationship, and he asked whether Alina thought it might be possible for them to explore a second chance at building something meaningful together. Alina's response was thoughtful and honest, acknowledging that she had also thought about Alexander over the years and had wondered whether his success had brought him the happiness he had expected to find. She explained that her own life choices had been guided by the lessons she had learned from their breakup, particularly the importance of finding work and relationships that aligned with her values rather than external measures of success. Alina was willing to consider rebuilding a relationship with Alexander, but only if he could demonstrate that his priorities had genuinely changed and that he was capable of maintaining balance between professional achievement and personal relationships. She had built a life she loved and was not willing to compromise her values or happiness for someone who had not learned from their previous mistakes. Alexander's courtship of Alina was different from any relationship he had pursued since college, requiring him to prove his sincerity and commitment through actions rather than expensive gestures or displays of wealth. Alina was unimpressed by luxury and status symbols, but she was moved by Alexander's willingness to spend time in her world, learning about her interests and values rather than trying to impress her with his resources. Their first official date was a simple dinner at Alina's favorite neighborhood restaurant, followed by a walk through the community where she lived and worked. Alexander was struck by Alina's knowledge of local issues and her involvement in grassroots organizations that addressed problems like affordable housing, food security, and educational equity. Her commitment to social justice and community development had grown during their years apart, and Alexander found himself inspired by her example. Over the following months, Alexander and Alina's relationship developed through shared activities that reflected Alina's interests and values rather than Alexander's wealth and status. They attended community meetings, volunteered at literacy programs, and spent time with Alina's students and colleagues, building a connection that was based on compatible values and mutual respect rather than material advantages. Alexander's transformation during this period was evident to everyone who knew him, as he began to integrate social responsibility and personal relationships into his life in ways that had been absent during his years of single-minded business focus. His work with the Sterling Foundation became more personally meaningful, and he started to see his wealth as a tool for creating positive change rather than simply accumulating more resources. Alina's influence on Alexander extended beyond their personal relationship to his business practices and philanthropic priorities, as she helped him understand the practical impact of corporate policies on working families and communities. Alexander began implementing changes at Sterling Technologies that improved employee benefits, environmental practices, and community engagement, using his position to create positive change that aligned with Alina's values. The major test of Alexander and Alina's renewed relationship came when Alexander was offered the opportunity to sell Sterling Technologies for a sum that would make him one of the wealthiest people in the world, while also requiring him to relocate to New York and commit to a consulting arrangement that would consume most of his time for the next 5 years. The offer forced Alexander to confront the same choice between wealth and relationship that had ended his college romance with Alina, though this time he understood the stakes and consequences more clearly. Alina made it clear that she would not ask him to refuse the opportunity, but she would also not be willing to build a life around someone whose priorities remained focused on accumulating wealth rather than nurturing relationships and contributing to community well-being. Alexander's decision to decline the buyout offer was motivated by his recognition that the wealthiest version of himself would also be the loneliest, and that the relationship he had rediscovered with Alina was worth more than any amount of money he could earn through business deals. His decision represented a fundamental shift in priorities that reflected genuine personal growth rather than temporary infatuation. Alexander's proposal to Alina came during a Sterling Foundation event at Lincoln High School, where students and teachers were celebrating the success of the pilot programs that had improved academic outcomes and expanded opportunities for college preparation and career development. Alexander had stayed after the event to help Alina clean up, and their casual interaction had evolved into the kind of extended, personal conversation they had not shared since college. Alina asked Alexander directly about his life outside of business and whether he had found happiness and fulfillment in the success he had chosen over their relationship 12 years earlier. Alexander's answer was honest and vulnerable, acknowledging that his professional achievements had come at the cost of personal connections and emotional satisfaction that money could not replace. Alexander admitted that he had never stopped thinking about Alina and wondering what their life together might have been like if he had made different choices during college. He expressed regret about prioritizing his business ambitions over their relationship, and he asked whether Alina thought it might be possible for them to explore a second chance at building something meaningful together. Alina's response was thoughtful and honest, acknowledging that she had also thought about Alexander over the years and had wondered whether his success had brought him the happiness he had expected to find. She explained that her own life choices had been guided by the lessons she had learned from their breakup, particularly the importance of finding work and relationships that aligned with her values rather than external measures of success. Alina was willing to consider rebuilding a relationship with Alexander, but only if he could demonstrate that his priorities had genuinely changed and that he was capable of maintaining balance between professional achievement and personal relationships. She had built a life she loved and was not willing to compromise her values or happiness for someone who had not learned from their previous mistakes. Alexander's courtship of Alina was different from any relationship he had pursued since college, requiring him to prove his sincerity and commitment through actions rather than expensive gestures or displays of wealth. Alina was unimpressed by luxury and status symbols, but she was moved by Alexander's willingness to spend time in her world, learning about her interests and values rather than trying to impress her with his resources. Their first official date was a simple dinner at Alina's favorite neighborhood restaurant, followed by a walk through the community where she lived and worked. Alexander was struck by Alina's knowledge of local issues and her involvement in grassroots organizations that addressed problems like affordable housing, food security, and educational equity. Her commitment to social justice and community development had grown during their years apart, and Alexander found himself inspired by her example. Over the following months, Alexander and Alina's relationship developed through shared activities that reflected Alina's interests and values rather than Alexander's wealth and status. They attended community meetings, volunteered at literacy programs, and spent time with Alina's students and colleagues, building a connection that was based on compatible values and mutual respect rather than material advantages. Alexander's transformation during this period was evident to everyone who knew him, as he began to integrate social responsibility and personal relationships into his life in ways that had been absent during his years of single-minded business focus. His work with the Sterling Foundation became more personally meaningful, and he started. After their honeymoon, Alexander and Elena settled into married life that successfully integrated Alexander's business responsibilities with Elena's teaching career and their shared commitment to the Sterling Foundation's educational mission. Alexander had restructured his role at Sterling Technologies to allow for better work-life balance, while Elena had been promoted to curriculum coordinator, giving her influence over educational policy throughout the district. Their partnership extended beyond their personal relationship to encompass their professional work, as Alexander's business expertise and resources combined with Elena's educational knowledge and community connections to create programs that address systemic problems rather than just providing temporary assistance. The Sterling Foundation became a national model for effective educational philanthropy that empowered communities rather than imposing external solutions. Alexandra and Elena's first child, a son they named David, was born 2 years after their wedding, during a period when both their careers and their foundation work were thriving in ways that demonstrated the success of their balanced approach to professional achievement and personal fulfillment. David's arrival added new meaning to their shared work and reminded them that their most important legacy would be the family and community they built together. Standing in Elena's classroom 5 years after their reunion, watching her teach a new generation of students, while their son played quietly in the reading corner, Alexander reflected on the journey that had brought him from isolated billionaire to happy husband, father, and community leader whose wealth served purposes larger than personal gratification. Alexander realized that Elena had not just been his lost love, but his lost compass, the person who could guide him toward understanding what success actually meant and how wealth could be used to create lasting value rather than temporary satisfaction. Their reunion had forced him to confront the emptiness of his previous lifestyle and had given him the opportunity to build something meaningful from the resources he had accumulated. Elena had shown Alexander that the most valuable currency was not money, but time, attention, and care given to people and causes that mattered, and that true wealth was measured in relationships sustained, communities strengthened, and lives improved through service and sacrifice for others. The billionaire who had once believed that money could buy everything he wanted had learned that the most important things in life could not be purchased, but had to be earned through integrity, commitment, and the willingness to prioritize love and service over personal advancement and material accumulation. Alexander Sterling had found his lost love by losing his obsession with wealth and discovering that the richest life was one lived in partnership with someone who understood that true success was not measured in dollars accumulated, but in hearts touched, minds inspired, and communities transformed through the power of love translated into action. In the end, the billionaire's lost love had never really been lost at all, but had been waiting for him to become the kind of person who deserved her and who understood that the greatest fortune was not what he could acquire, but what he could give, share, and build with someone who loved him not for his money, but for his capacity to grow, change, and choose love over everything else the world might offer as a substitute for the real thing.